All right, let's start with this. A 25% blanket tariff on all steel and aluminum expected to come sometime today. This is the latest threat from President Trump as a trade war between the U.S. and its top trading partners ramps up. It's unclear if that tax will be added on top of the sweeping 10% tariff already in place for countries like China. But Trump says the announcement will, quote, help U.S. steel. Take a listen.
We'll also be announcing steel tariffs on Monday.
On this tomorrow?
Monday, yeah, tomorrow.
What countries will those go on?
Everybody. Steel.
Including Canada and Mexico?
Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
10%?
10, no, 25%.
25 for aluminum as well?
25, for both.
For both. And on steel, sir, are you ruling out then Nippon Steel having a 51% stake or higher? They won't have a majority stake?
Nobody can have a majority stake for U.S. Steel. They can for other companies, but not for U.S. Steel. I think you agree with that, right? U.S. Steel was one of our great companies, and through a lot of stupidity and bad government and also bad management of the company, it lost that luster. But it's going to gain it back, and tariffs are going to help.
Meanwhile, China firing back on that original 10% tax with a list of their own. Here are the counter tariffs on U.S. goods set to kick in today. 15% on coal, 15% on liquefied natural gas, 10% on crude oil, 10% on agricultural machinery, and 10% on large engine cars. Let's bring in CBS News White House digital reporter Aaron Navarro. He is live in D.C. and breaks it all down for us. Aaron, thank you so much for being here. The president says tariffs are going to help bring back U.S. steel. So how is that going to happen?
Liz, good afternoon. One impact these tariffs that President Trump has announced could have is heightened interest in U.S. steel and generally domestic production of steel and aluminum, since it's expected to be more costly for imports of these goods from other countries. We've seen share prices for a handful of U.S. companies rise this morning as well. What it could hurt, however, is the price for home building and the auto industry. The U.S. imports a significant amount of steel and especially aluminum from other countries. And if you just look at maybe the Detroit area and Ontario, tariffs on steel there could really impact the auto industry and kind of the linked economy that those two areas have.
He also previewed another set of tariffs going to be going into effect potentially later on this week. Can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah, this was something he announced last week during a presser with the Japanese Prime Minister, reciprocal tariffs that he said would be announced on Tuesday or Wednesday. These are basically tariffs that will match tariffs levied by other countries in the United States. But it's expected to really impact Canada, Mexico, the European Union, China, and Japan with these tariffs. But big picture, Trump has really portrayed tariffs as a way to fix trade deficits with other countries, particularly Canada and Europe. The latest steel tariffs, these reciprocal tariffs, are the latest step in that vision.
You know, the video you just saw there on your screen was snippets of that Super Bowl interview the president did with Fox News. Now, this clip on the president's plan for Gaza just out this morning. Let's take a listen to that.
We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever. It's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. You know, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, I want to lean into this a little bit, Aaron. I mean, do we have any more details on where the people of Gaza would go if the U.S. follows through on taking over the region? I mean, you mentioned Jordan and Egypt, but any other plans?
Yeah, this question in Trump's plan of whether Palestinians can return to Gaza in general, and if so, when, is the key thing to watch on this topic. Over the weekend, in that clip you showed, Trump seemed to indicate because the country is so torn up now, in part due to the Israeli military strikes that came as they have tried to root out Hamas, Palestinians would not be able to return in the next few years. He suggested that Palestinians would have permanent homes in other neighboring countries such as Jordan or Egypt, though it's important to note that many of these countries have rejected Trump's idea, though as you saw in that clip, he often says that he can, quote, make a deal with these countries.
Aaron Navarro, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us. Well, as President Trump carries out his agenda, the latest CBS News polling shows the majority of people approve of the work he's done so far. In fact, 70% say the president is doing exactly what he promised in his campaign. And as far as Trump's overall job rating, 53% approve. CBS News Elections and Surveys Executive Director Anthony Salvanto has more on what this all means. Anthony, just starting off, just break down the latest polling for us. What do all these questions and what does the polling kind of indicate to you?
I think one of the things behind the numbers you just showed everybody there, Liz, is when we looked at what we had people describe about Donald Trump during the campaign, words that they thought described him, and we ask them now, you see these big numbers that sustain views that he is tough, energetic, focused. All of these things are some of the reasons that you see those positive approval numbers. And the other one that you mentioned there, I'll point out, you know, this 70% of saying he's doing what he promised, that's whether you approve of him or not. But there does appear to be political value there, especially for folks who voted for him, for his supporters. They see somebody who is doing what he said he would do in the campaign. And that's how people get a general sense of things, especially in the early days of an administration, Liz.
So how do these numbers compare to Trump's first term in office?
His approval numbers now are better than anything he had in his first term.
Wow.
And what's particularly interesting about that is you drill down a little on some of the policies right now that people are looking at. Not all of them are getting positive returns right now, but some of them are. Let me point out these. His program to deport immigrants who are illegally in the U.S. gets approval. Again, back to this idea of echoing the campaign. We saw voters approving of that idea in the campaign when they voted for him. And, you know, somewhat related, sending troops, U.S. troops to the U.S.-Mexico border, again, gets even higher, gets 2/3 of approval. And then his supporters like the focus on some other things like cutting government spending, other aspects where you see, especially for that base, people saying right at the outset anyway, he's delivering a lot of what they expected.
What about the view on tariffs? I mean, people are obviously going to feel the effects in their wallets. Do they think that these tariffs are a good idea?
So that points, Liz, to one of the bigger gaps between what people were expecting and what they're seeing right now. So let me start with tariffs, which is this, and you'll see that majorities do not favor tariffs, new tariffs on goods from Mexico, Europe, Canada, all of that. Only China gets a majority approving there. And the reason for that is that most people tell us they think that tariffs would raise prices. Now, behind that, we also see that we get this number, and this speaks to that idea I said earlier about that gap between delivering and expectations. You get 2/3, including a lot of Republicans, who say that the administration so far is not focusing enough, in their view, on lowering prices. And you may recall, inflation was one of the big reasons, maybe the big reason, that Donald Trump won. So you want to watch that. You want to watch that difference between delivery and expectations. And I think tariffs clearly relates to that dynamic, Liz.
Yeah, another question that you posed was about Elon Musk and Doge. And the numbers were interesting, given the pushback we've heard from lawmakers. What did you find?
So the first thing you see here is really partisan splits, right? You see most Republicans say, yeah, okay, his Doge task force and Elon Musk should have at least some influence on what's going on, though not necessarily a lot. And that a lot number is really a lot more of folks who say they're part of the MAGA movement. Maybe that's not surprising, but that's where a lot of that push is coming from. Now, when I say partisan, you see a lot of Democrats here, the bulk of Democrats saying not much or no influence for Elon Musk and Doge. But the other part here is, I think from a public opinion standpoint, this is one that may take a while to play out. Right now, we know that, especially for Republicans, that ideas like cutting government spending have always been popular. Cutting foreign aid have always been popular. So those broad goals, you're going to find a lot of agreement from the base. But what happens as all of this plays out over the coming weeks and months starts to impact people one way or the other, that's where I think you'll watch these numbers and see how public opinion unfolds, Liz.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, no question. Anthony Salvanto, thank you.